really exciting time, I feel like, for being able to use data to do interesting and actionable things for our sales teams. To be honest, win-loss analysis in my mind sits across a lot of different functions. If you do that in a silo and you're not getting that buy-in from senior leaders and your other peers across the organization, it's not going to go anywhere. I love to see less content but more context is really the thing where teams succeed.
How would you start even this conversation? Like, who comes and says, hey, enablement, we need to do win-loss analysis, and what's your response to that? Shannon, how's it going?
Good, Michael. Good to see you. Thanks
Good
for
to see you too.
having me.
Of course, it's my pleasure having you on again. I'm really excited because first and foremost, I was going to get to know you, and I'm going to get to know you more. But also, the topic is extremely interesting. It's win-loss analysis and how to get the right insights and help our sellers to be relevant with the right content and help our buyers to buy better. But before doing that, I want to get to know you a little bit more. Tell us about your background, who you are, what you're working on these days, and we'll take it from
Sure.
there.
Yeah. So I am founder of the Prompt Insight Group. It's a consulting company focused on enablement and branding, but have a long history in enablement. Spent time at a couple of different companies, both in the supply chain space, FedEx and Kinaxis, but have spent a lot of time in enablement in different roles, a lot of content related roles, a lot of time looking at how you can use different insights from your sellers from the market to really enhance that content. So I think that's part of our conversation today, which I'm excited about.
Absolutely. Look, I'm curious. How did
Yeah.
you get into sales enablement? Because
Uh,
there's always a story behind that.
does anyone grow up and think, oh, I'm going to be in sales? Interestingly, for me, I have a journalism undergrad. For me, everything always kind of goes back to content. I had interned at some advertising agencies and kind of said, I'm not sure that's for me. But my last year in college, I took some computer science classes and learned how to code HTML. This was back in the day when I was coding directly in WordPad and making sites. And so I got my first job out of college with FedEx, making departmental websites, which was fantastic learning. But it just kind of over time, experience at FedEx is one of the great things about a big company like that. You get to move around, and I landed in their solutions organization, which is a whole organization dedicated to supporting sales in different ways. And because of my content background, I seem to always be in roles that were related to enablement. So I really different content platforms, RFPs. I managed an RFP team at one point, but all kinds of different things that really support sales and the whole buying process that have really, over the years made that enablement background interesting for me, and that journalism degree that I never really imagined would lead me to enablement kind of led me there. So
Look, it's all about content these days. Like
yeah,
dark social is becoming the main platform for companies to take care of top of funnel and brand awareness and all that stuff. So definitely you took advantage of it. I have another or actually two other guests coming
yeah.
on the show from FedEx. I'm not going through their names yet, but we can talk about it
Oh,
after this. So
exciting.
it's an interesting company. Look, of course, they really took care of their processes. With any big corporations, to your point, you get a chance to really, kind of like
Yeah.
explore more than just your own role and see, what's going on. And if you're curious enough, again, you find your path, and it sounds like you just did that. All right. Look, for someone completely new to the idea of win-loss analysis, I want to hear your process for turning raw data into something actionable for sales.
Yeah, we're in a really exciting time, I feel like, for being able to use data to do interesting and actionable things for our sales teams. Everyone is, swimming in data, right? Like we have data all over the place. But I think now with AI being so, at our fingertips, we can actually take all this data and do things with it. So I think for win loss in particular, you have to start with, what are my reps saying? What's the field telling me? Pragmatic Institute had a great study that they put out a couple years ago that kind of indicated that I think something like 85% of the information in our CRMs not right. Like what you're seeing that people just sort of, put their little notes in, they're not spending a lot of time on those notes, right? And that 65% of the time, I think it was that even your competitors that they're tagging in there are wrong. So, I mean, you can get some good information out of your CRM notes, but you can't really rely on that to have a good perspective on why you won or lost a deal. So I think it is all about that. I mean, I hear the word triangulation a lot, but it's true. You've got to use multiple sources to really understand where you're winning and where you're losing. The other thing I think that you have to think about when you start into this is, no decision is your biggest competitor. I mean, companies get overwhelmed and then business happens, the world changes, tariffs, whatever's happening in the world, and then they're like, I can't spend that money right now, and then they drop the whole deal, right? So you have to figure out, where did I not give this prospective customer that full sense of we can accomplish what they need? Where can I pull that information out to know where that gap was in order to either fix my enablement, tell the product team that they need to make some changes, whatever it is that we need to do. So I think it's really starting with that. So I think you use that CRM data, but now that we have tools like Gong, you have all that great call data that a lot of companies are using. You have that as a source. And there are a lot of great third party companies that do interviews. I think third party interviews are a great source of information. In that same Pragmatic Institute study, they say that you're going to get like 2 times more accurate, better information when you use that third party to help you kind of get their real sense of what was great in the process and what wasn't great. Because you really want, when you have a third party doing interviews for you, is really get them to talk to your perspective, either hopefully your customer or your lost customer, right? Get them to talk through their whole buying process. What triggered them, who was involved in the process, how they made the decision, all of that. And then what was good about your sales team, what didn't work. But the thing that I have seen be really effective is you have the same set of questions and you use that same set of questions kind of year over year, and trying not to, change those up. I mean, because it really should be pretty basic, like walk me through what was good and what was bad when you have a third party doing those interviews. And those same sort of questions, if you go to a survey style to get data back on win loss, right? The questions should all be similar. So even if you get data from multiple sources that you can compare, right? I think really taking that information and using third parties to help you tease out what went well, what didn't, and using that as hopefully your third or fourth source of why you won or why you lost a deal is what I see as a best practice.
You shared a lot of great stuff, and I agree with you. First and foremost, you need multiple sources because CRM data, look, one of the things that is, to me right now at this point, is a commodity. We offer it as a company as well. Hey, we take your notes automatically, we put it on a CRM. But sometimes you don't get that reality check because buyers lie. Like always. Like the reason behind it, I'm not talking about that. Maybe the seller is lying and they notice it, or they're burned from the past experience. But we know the information, even through conversation, sometimes it doesn't tell the whole story. You mentioned about third party. I really like that because just imagine you met someone, you build a relationship with someone. It's just so difficult to say, how bad the experience was. And sometimes companies only rely on their own, internal team to do this stuff. People still feel very uncomfortable. You said something else that I really like, and it reminds me of The Jolt Effect by Matt Dixon. And it was just about, that fear of messing things up, and especially like past 2 years up till now, everybody's really worried about their seat and getting bad decisions. That's why we see more stakeholders getting involved. Deal cycles are getting lengthier. That whole experience that we give as sellers to buyers, I think, has direct impact on this, regardless of what product we are offering or how we position ourselves in the market. Now, I want to get a little tactical about this because,
Yeah.
yes, conversations, we can track them. We have frameworks, we have methodology. I want to look at it a little differently because, for example, discovery. Sometimes we really judge that conversation based on how our sellers are performing. But the underlying issue is a little bit deeper. It's just the awareness stage is not really clear. Yes, maybe we have people within the ICP, they check all the boxes. Yeah, this is an enterprise company, they have this many headcount or this much revenue, but they're not just ready to walk through the whole buying process. Maybe they're just like doing this for education. And yes, sellers with their skills, they can uncover all these points. But just imagine you figure out, like, maybe actually the leads we are getting right now or people that we are attracting, they're really not at that level to really pull the trigger and buy. How do you communicate this with executive leadership? Because this is not something that we can necessarily just bring big change by saying, hey, Mr. Seller, or maybe their managers, like, you guys should take care of this.
Yeah, I think you bring up an excellent point. I think, win-loss analysis can just be an exercise if you don't kind of have that strategy going into it in terms of what am I going to do with all this data, right? So I think there's a couple things that have to happen. You have to have your leadership team bought into what are you going to do with the win-loss data, right? They have to be dying to get that information every month or every quarter, depending on when you release your information back to them. So I think there's that. I think there's also having that leader, that sponsor for your win-loss analysis and really being able to sort of create, if you will, a taxonomy around the different areas that you potentially need to look at or that you're seeing back in the data. So you can know, is this an enablement thing in terms of the way our sales team is behaving? Is this feedback on our product? Is this, is this a pricing feedback? Is this, being able to categorize the different types of feedback you get, because now we have such great tools with different AI. I mean, even ChatGPT can take straight interviews and give you back, good, like, this falls into this category. And if you tell a tool like ChatGPT, here are our categories of things, can you tell us that in this feedback interview, what things fall into that category? You're going to get information that's much more actionable that you're going to then be able to do something with. So I think it's, you have to have some leadership and sponsorship to start it. You have to really then dig in and say what areas, right? Like, and some of this you may have to do a little bit of getting that feedback first before you start creating categories, but then you need to over time create those categories so you can say, gosh, we're getting so much around product, or we're getting so much around our sales process, or whatever it is that you can then start to make those tweaks and changes, and hopefully faster and in, you know, more like real time with what you have going on in your business.
I love
So
that. It sounds like you're beyond having a sponsor. You need to come up with a plan and give that reality check. This is why we are actually walking through this. Give me your feedback. Are we aligned? I want to talk about those categories. Like,
yeah,
why
yeah,
are we even doing this?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I think there's a lot of categories that you're going to hope to get out of either that interview or what you're seeing in CRM data, right? Because, you know, we talked about earlier the no decision, right?
Mhm.
Because that's one that you can easily categorize, and you can start to say, identify what are the activities, what are the behaviors that customers are doing, you know, prior to kind of that no decision. And I think you can then help your sales team do things like, you know, use their time better. And maybe if you see a customer going no decision, you can start funneling your energy toward a different customer, right? And be more effective and efficient with your time. So I think there's that. But in terms of categories, you know, I think a lot of that is around, you know, enablement, product, marketing, because I think there's a lot around messaging that you can pull out. You know, you can tell if a customer thinks that everybody's the same, right? If they don't understand how you're different, then that is feedback that your marketing team needs to hear, right? You need to say, okay, we're not doing a good job differentiating ourselves. How can we then start to tweak that message? What do we need to do to make that sharper so that it is clear how we are different than someone else, right? So I think those are the three categories. And I think in my experience, you also have pricing. I think in some of the like true deal and legal, like, you know, you have some of those kind of categories that you probably have thrown in there. But um, I think once you get those categories, you also, I don't know if we want to jump to here, but kind of that next step is having all of those stakeholders, the people that are responsible for those pieces of your business, come together and review the information that you're getting back. The reviewing those insights that you're getting from the win-loss analysis and saying, okay, of these top 5 insights that we got this month, is there something that we want to action? Is it too early? Is this still too anecdotal? Or, you know, have we seen this repeatedly, you know, for a year? Then, hey, product team, I'm sorry to tell you, like, we need to think about, you know, making a product change, you know, stuff like that. And then being able to bring all of those stakeholders together. And I said, having that leader, you know, be able to identify what those action items are out of the insights, and then track those as you move forward in the organization, and have that readout and visibility to your senior leadership, because hopefully they're already bought in. But I would think that most senior leadership teams, when they start to hear the insights that they're getting directly from customers, either from the interviews or in out of your gong calls, all of that, everyone should be riveted, right? Across the company. Every team should be, it should be a must attend meeting. It should be everyone prepping and reading before that meeting, because that is real time feedback about how well you're performing.
Look, I completely agree with you. And the hardest part, like just imagine you got all the data, and I love the fact that he said, hey, keep those questions consistent so we can find patterns. Is it really skill sets from our sellers that, lacking something, or are we talking about product, problems, or maybe marketing messaging? So you need to build alignment internally, and that's not an easy job to do. Just a second ago, you said we need executive, sponsorship on this. So how would you start even this conversation? Like, who comes and says, "Hey, enablement, we need to do win-loss analysis," and what's your response to that?
Yeah, wow. Because to be honest, win loss analysis in my mind sits across a lot of different functions, right? But you have to have someone who says, it's mine, and I'm going to be the leader. I'm going to be the one that drives that collaboration, drives those conversations across all of the needed pieces of the organization. Because if you do that in a silo, if you're, say, marketing or enablement, and you do all this analysis and you're not putting that out there and getting that buy in from senior leaders and your other peers across the organization, it's not going to go anywhere. I think I saw something that said companies that share win loss analysis get something like a 25% lift, when you share this information more frequently and regularly. And it is because I think it has to be a cultural change, right? If
Mhm.
you're not doing it yet, and you need to kind of approach it that way, to say, get that senior leaders buy in, and to say, hey team, we're going to go down this path, and everyone needs to be bought in that this analysis and this feedback and these insights are going to be something that are important to how we function. And I think you have to build some processes around it, because it may create pivots that are very fast, right? Because you may get feedback that says, hey, our sales team doesn't know about this product, and we're missing the boat. And so that may cause your enablement team to have to totally change, the schedule of what they had planned for the next month for their enablement, sessions for their field team, right? But you have to have a leader that's going to say, hey, we're on board, and get everyone else to say, we're willing to pivot if it's good data and good information. But I think there has to be a lot of documentation, a lot of sharing of the information, and meetings. I know people hate meetings, and that's an ugly word. I just don't know how to do it unless you get all of the stakeholders on the call at once. I mean,
Mhm.
because if you have a call, with just, say, the, product team, you're just going to only focus on the insights that are coming out of your win loss data that are product related, and you're going to maybe miss the boat about the messaging. That maybe if the messaging were tweaked, maybe you don't need to change the product. Maybe the product is fine, but maybe it's, we're not positioning our product correctly or to the correct, profile of company. So I think there's a lot of things that you have to get everybody on board that make this process one of the more difficult, more collaborative processes across a company, that everyone has to sort of be all in.
Look, this is interesting because especially for bigger companies, you might have the muscle. So maybe you have even multiple people helping with enablement. Someone really take care of this, and we need to
Yeah.
walk through this because it's important. Like it's a monthly event, like maybe activity. Or for companies that are even hyper growing right now, we have some audience here, Series C, Series D companies, they're fast growing startups, and they just hired their first, head of enablement, and so many things you can cover. Like you're going to work on our onboarding processes, everboarding, and then let's look at methodology we need to roll out that we never had, coaching the coaches and other. Where where in that list of priority this win-loss analysis should sit, and maybe at what stage of the company. For example, we are early stage startup. We don't spend much time going through this practice, obviously, because we're so hands-on and talking to clients, and we don't have a massive clientele, obviously.
Yeah.
When is the right time to look into implementing such a thing within our organizations?
Ideally, from my perspective, you would do that as part of your culture, right? And so you would kind of start out with that, because everyone needs to, all of your different leads, your product, your enablement, your marketing, all have to sort of come to grips with the idea that if we get feedback from potential customers, we get a quarter's worth of feedback that is telling us we are not doing it well. Our message isn't hitting, our sales team isn't delivering, right? That they all have to be willing to pivot and be able to drop what they're doing. Either that means change it completely or delay or whatever needs to be done. But I think that becomes a cultural piece that if you don't sort of set that bar early, people get into a groove of marketing is mine, product is mine, enablement is mine, and I don't need to change, for these other teams. And I think if you set that bar early and have that culture of interaction and reviewing those insights, you're going to set yourself up for success and be more, agile and be able to respond to the business needs faster.
Make absolute sense. So it means we have to start early to build that culture, because again, hopefully the goal of the company is to be sustainable and stick around the block for long term. Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, you just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails. These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With SellMeThisPen AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only: revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at SellMeThisPen.ai. Now,
Yeah.
I want to give it some direction, because to your point, we can talk about marketing, we can talk about, right now, product, and I want to focus on sales. Imagine it this way: once you have some relevant, insights, how do you package them for your frontline sellers? You can actually use them in different stages of the sales cycle.
This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I love to see less content but more context is really the thing that I think is where teams succeed, is that if you spend less time building those white papers, but really spend more time telling your sellers how to position those pieces of content, you're going to be more successful. I think you only need, you need a lot less content than most teams think that they need. And I think this is another benefit of this kind of win-loss collaboration, because you have marketing and product and enablement all talking more, and you start to see, maybe I don't need all this content, right? Maybe I just need a few good key pieces. I'll tell you from my content history, I've done things like I turned off 1,500 pieces of content one time. Nobody asked me. Nobody
Because
asked me.
nobody's touching it.
Because nobody's touching it. I mean, we see that, right, all the time in data. Lots of studies that say sellers aren't, our sellers aren't using our content, right? So you are better off, from my opinion, from an enablement perspective, is saying, are you inside seller? Like, are you top of funnel? okay, here are your three key pieces and how you should be positioning it, right? And spend more time developing the sales plays around those three key pieces for that type of seller. Then you can take those three key pieces and say, you're an enterprise seller. Okay. You want to take this content mid funnel, and this is how you would position it. And you would have a different sales play. So, from my perspective, I could see, you know, I like to see the same pieces of content, but really giving that multiple sales plays depending on the types of sellers in your organization. So, you might have, 5, 6 sales plays for the same three pieces of content, right? Or the same product or whatever it is that you're trying to sell. But it's really about setting them up for success and knowing how to then position that. And I think out of win-loss data, you really can start to see who's succeeding, where those messages land. And so then you can start to turn those levers around. Okay, maybe this enterprise sales play needs to be adjusted because this message not really hitting, right? And so you start to make those tweaks. And when you have less content that you have to go back and rework everything under the sun, you're in a much better position to move faster to help your sellers sell, right? So I mean that's for me it's more about the context. I'd rather have, like I said, three good pieces of content and create, sales plays all day long to help all the sellers. Cause I mean, I've heard that over my career of like, there's all this great content out there in the system, but I just don't know how to position it in an initial call. The other thing I hear too, buyers want sellerless processes, right? They don't want to talk to anybody. They just want to be able to research and reach out when they get to a place that they need information, which is usually pricing, right? So our buyers want deeper content earlier, right? They want deeper content earlier. So I think the thing that I'm seeing it from a content perspective is that, the content that you would give a seller that is more complex and usually more detailed, and the marketing sort of top of funnel public content that is, you know, lighter on the details, right? They're getting closer together, right? They're getting a lot closer together because that's what buyers are telling us they want. So those marketing and enablement teams really need to work closely. And so I think that makes a strong case for less pieces of content, and maybe they are a little bit more complex, but in that case, you have to give your selling team more context to be able to position that at their place in the funnel.
Okay. You know what I love about this so much? Because you're talking about enablement adding actual value to sellers' life. Like I've been a seller for the longest time. And to your point, all those great, content, never touch it. As long as you hit your numbers, nobody cares. But the problem is you don't have that real-time insight as a seller because you're on field in the front lines selling. Even if you
Yeah,
have the skill sets, if you don't have context, to your point, around what's happening within similar deals, maybe even for other sellers, it doesn't matter. You don't know the reasonings of why people actually move forward or not, or where in their buyer journey they are today. So marketing goes and do, events, and you get, a bunch of people coming inbound, or even if it's outbound. If you don't have context around how to position for this specific buyer persona,
yeah,
beyond just, again, the checklist buyer persona, you will fail. And what I like about this, you mentioned, look, if you're an inbound seller, if you're taking care of top of funnel, if you're enterprise, we need to be relevant to their flow of work. Which
absolutely.
deals are you working on?
Yeah,
What's happening right now in the market? What competitors are doing that we are not doing? And giving that insight, that's valuable. That's where sellers actually respect enablement because they sell them deals rather than just giving them more work. I really like this.
yeah.
Okay.
And you bring up a great point. I think from like if you're an enablement and you own the win-loss data, if you are not doing a good job of sort of internally marketing the fact that you've done all of this analysis, right? You've triangulated your feedback, you've gotten all this information, and you've then used it to update your competitor battle cards, and you've done all of this work, and you're not publicizing to your selling team like, hey, it's not just, we didn't just randomly make an update to this battle card, right? Like there was a lot
Mhm.
of work that went into it. You're going to build a lot more credibility with your sales team if they know and understand, hey, they're taking all of this win-loss analysis and baking it into our content, to our battle cards, to all of this. And you really can't point your sales team in too many directions, right? They're busy, they're overwhelmed, but you want to be able to say, hey, we updated these three key pieces. We updated your sales play. We updated your battle card. But I think that, again, that collaboration talk across the organization really raises the level of trust in the information you're putting out there, right?
Mhm.
I trust that battle card because I know that they took that win loss information, and we're seeing this competitor do this, so you know, we need to change our message here, and that's why they did that. I think that makes your sellers really, I mean, it makes them trust you more.
I agree. How should we make this more individualized? You know what I'm trying to say? We all have those sellers that regardless of how much information you share or evidence you give, it's not me. You know, I'm all set. You know, I know what I'm doing. This changes for the rest of them, not for me.
Yeah.
How would you get adoption, and who's actually partnering with enablement the most to help the message sit, nicely within their flow of work and say, hey, it is relevant. I need to pay attention to this. Who's
Yeah.
that, partner with enablement internally?
That's a great question. It's interesting because I will say, in my experience, sellers tend to, because enablement teams are the closest usually to sales, there's usually kind of a deeper level of trust to the enablement team as opposed to marketing. And they're like, oh, marketing gives us that fluffy information. We don't really need
Yeah.
whatever marketing's doing over there, right? Which is why I think, if marketing's heavily involved in your win-loss analysis, it's really important that your sellers know that, right? Like they're not just creating pretty logos, right? There's teeth behind what your marketing team's doing. But product, when they get involved in hearing win-loss and they are open to making adjustments, I think your sellers get really excited because, when you're a frontline seller and you have to answer why the product does or doesn't do what is expected, they're put on the spot, right? And they want to see it. They live and die on that product. They want to see it improve. They get really excited when their product teams get involved with win-loss kind of data. I mean, from my perspective, when they see product teams, making those adjustments and doing it more real time, and I think that's another thing that you want to publicize internally to make sure that everyone, hey, we hear you and we heard your feedback, because you know I promise you, those notes are in your CRM, right? When something didn't work right in that demo and whatever, those notes are in the demo. I mean, are in the
Mhm.
CRM, right? And so they get really excited when those changes are made based on the things, their feedback, right? So I think that that's one that really drives their interest from what I've seen.
I want to challenge that a little bit
Okay.
because I agree with you. if it's relevant, if they pay attention to that content with the
Yeah.
right context, this is great. But getting sellers' attention is a very, very difficult job. Like, okay, let me make myself a guinea pig.
Yeah.
We work with different, companies. Some of them are in the same space, almost selling the same product, like
Yeah.
same revenue, mark, and everything. Almost the setup is very similar. We see some teams are really, really successful because they're doing two things differently. First and foremost, they get alignment very early on from sales managers. They're super close to their reps and they push. And then second one, they build champion through the seller team. 2 or 3 people who actually want to talk about it, share their success story. This is amazing. Again, in theory, some teams are
Yeah.
more engaged. They have this culture to support.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of teams that you see this misalignment right away, and the challenge then goes toward, again, enablement. Yeah, you spend all this time. Should we even continue this again activity right now? You do win-loss analysis, you update your deck, and you send it to, but you get no adoption. Based on your experience, if you can share, have you ever dealt with such situation, and how would you navigate again changing the mindset or behavior, if you will?
Yeah. Yeah, I think a couple things there that come to mind for me. I think when enablement teams give their information back to the different segments within their organization by segment. I mean, when you, as an enabler, really take it that step and make it really just at their fingertips by the type of seller that they are, number one, right? And so helping those teams, with their direct role, I think is going to earn you a lot of buy-in from your sellers if you take that time to really make it easy for them. I think in terms of adoption of information, right, for our sales team, there's a lot of different ways to make that happen, but I think sales plays that are updated frequently and, like I said, for those specific sales personas are going to win you a lot if you do that regularly. And then really communicating the changes that, okay, we had a leadership meeting this quarter. We reviewed these insights out of our win loss. These are the top 5, action items that we're going to take. And I think you report out on, the next month or the next quarter, this is this is what happened. And I think once you see a pattern of, hey, people are actually trying to make a change in the product, make a change in the marketing message, make a change in our training to make us better, I think you earn that trust from your team. So I think it's a combination of making the information easily available and really communicating the activities, tracking and communicating the activities.
I'm with you. I love what you said about seller persona, because we sometimes really emphasize too much on buyer personas. Get to
Yeah.
know your buyer. Get to know. Do we know our sellers? Do we know their motivation beyond what they do? Are we even relevant? To your point, we got SME sellers, we got enterprise. Are we giving the same content to everyone across the board? All these things again can help build that connection between enablement and sales. Look, I love to continue this conversation. A lot of questions, but we're almost about time. So I have a few rapid fire questions. I need
Okay.
very short answers if you're ready. So my previous guest, Matt Marshall, is a former CRO, 4 exits under his belt.
Yeah.
Amazing guy. He was on the show yesterday, actually, and he said, I have a question for Shannon. What's the best way to stay aligned with a sales leader to drive enablement through an organization?
Well, I think your enablement leaders need to attend your sales meetings on a weekly basis, and there should be enablement metrics that you're sharing back that you need to be a line item on your sales meetings to say, hey, of your team, only 30% of them looked at the most recent sales play, hey, leaders, you need to talk to them a little bit more about this product, this message, right? I think that's probably the key, the basic key that I would start with is just really that close weekly attendance on those meetings, because all those sales teams are having those weekly roundups of how did your week go? What did you close? Where's your pipeline? All of that. So, enablement should be an agenda item on those meetings.
I love it. I love it. All right. Sales enablement leaders will be more effective if they only
gave more context and less content.
I love that. Okay.
Kind of my thing, I think.
Love it. All right. Instead of sell me this pen, sell me this.
I would say, hey, sell me the solution and tell me why we should be in business together.
That's amazing. How your career impacted your personal development?
Oh gosh. Yeah. I'm definitely someone who loved school growing up, and I like technology, so anytime a new technology comes out, I'm like, ooh, like I want to learn more about that. So, it happened for me early when I taught myself HTML, and then, at FedEx, the great thing early on in my career is at the time, they had all these internal classes you could take. I took all this Java and all this other stuff and learned programming, which was crazy for a journalism major, right? It's not like I really became a programmer at any point in my life, but over time, I was always involved in systems, right? And I was always involved in a content system and its rollout. And I think that interest in learning really has allowed me to, add a new thing under my belt, get into a new project. The other thing, because I think I am a learner at heart, I'm like, well, I don't know that yet, but I'll go research and figure it out, right? So when projects come up in my career, especially ones that people didn't want to take, I'm always like, hey, I'll take it. Like, I'll go figure it out. There was one that I had was like, hey, we need a change management process. And I had people going, this is like, don't touch this.
Too much trouble.
Yeah, like this is, political and all, things that can be difficult in an organization. And I was like, hey, yeah, I'll take it. Like, let's go. Let's go figure out how we can make processes better and what we can do. And so I think that sort of, curiosity has always allowed me in my career to, add something new, and usually leads to a new opportunity or new team. So
I love it. I love it. So, my last question. Our next guest is Kate. She's the revenue enablement leader at Dialpad. Do you have any questions for her?
A lot of us are very deeply, a lot of companies are pretty deeply embedded in their CRMs, right? And a lot of technology has come that are starting to make those CRMs look a little clunky. What kind of appetite is there in the world to start looking at those base systems and making changes to be able to, function a little faster, a little differently? Because, I won't name names, but there's some systems that I've seen in my past, some CRMs that are pretty big and pretty monolithic that are hard to, hard to move. I'm curious if that's on the radar at the moment, or really are we kind of taking that as a, given and not looking at those kind of things and moving past that.
Look, it was a great conversation. I'm so happy that we got a chance to sit down and have this again few moments. If someone wants to reach out to you, can they and how?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. So my last name means left in Spanish, but it is a little complicated. Izquierdo. Feel free to look me up on LinkedIn and message me there. Happy to respond. Also, the Prompt Insight group you can also find on LinkedIn. Happy to respond to messages there. Would love to connect.
Awesome. Amazing. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and until next time, bye for now.
Thanks, Michael.